I think businesses, individuals, communities, we all have a role to play, and we all have agency. We can do things. We can make a difference. And I remember being in India when I was Secretary of State for official business, of course, with the government, but also I met with businesses and groups of women and activists who were trying to provide cleaner cooking. Now think about that. Clean cooking. Why? Because so much of what is burned for cooking in the world still today is polluting. And the fourth leading cause of death in the world is respiratory illnesses. And there's a huge percentage of those that come to women and children because they are cooking food over polluting fires. And so we launched a big effort to change the way, to create a market for clean cooking utensils. Now that's a small thing, but it could have a big impact. So there is something for all of us to think about doing. And of course, I want to see governments do a much better job of fulfilling their responsibility and not turning the clock back and not pretending that climate change is not real. But I want to see businesses and philanthropies and individuals and communities coming up with their own ideas. And that's why, you know, at the Clean Global Initiative, we partner with all these different groups. We partner with governments, and we partner with businesses, and we partner with philanthropies and community organizations, because I honestly believe now is the time for us to get creative, focused, and determined to address climate change in all the ways that each of us can.
Thank you for that very rousing call to action for collaboration and integrated approaches. Speaking of transformations, we're undergoing two major disruptions right now at the same time. The planet is changing, and the nature of work itself is also changing. And of course, I'm speaking to the climate transition as well as the AI revolution that is underway. We have a massive AI summit going on right now in Delhi, as you know. And look, AI can be an incredible tool to address the climate challenge. I mean, it can really optimize renewable grids. AI can help us with hyper-local projections around flooding, strengthen agricultural resilience. But this technology is also consuming vast amounts of power, water, infrastructure, not to mention the fact that climate and AI together are fundamentally going to reshape labor markets and migration at a scale we've never seen before. So are we leveraging the present at the cost of the future?
We don't know yet. I'm very pleased that you're doing two things today that are about the future. This conference about climate right here in Mumbai, the conference about AI in Delhi. But we can't just talk about this. We've got to do much more to understand more deeply the interconnectivity between AI and climate, and really AI and everything. You know, as of now, it appears, other than, you know, having a conversation or asking a question to whatever, chat GPT, Claude, Gemini, whoever you're talking to, the biggest advance has been in health. But we've seen some really exciting ways that AI can not just having aggregated information, but analyze it and provide in real time advice to physicians and other health practitioners. I'm very excited about that. But I think we would be naive not to recognize the potential threats that AI and its development is causing. I mean, we even hear from the people who run these big companies, they don't have any idea what is going to happen. They don't know how these technical advances are going to impact humanity. So if the people creating them don't know, then we have an obligation to say, let's slow down and figure out how we're going to manage this. And you mentioned the energy requirement for AI and the water requirement for running the big data server complexes. How is that going to affect the rest of us? How is that going to affect the energy supply, the cost of energy? How is it going to affect the clean water supply? Because for reasons that I don't pretend to understand, they claim they can't use recycled water. They have to use fresh water. Well, a lot of places in the world don't have an adequate supply of fresh water. So what does all that mean in terms of how we manage reaction to AI? But then the other issue that you alluded to, the labor market issue. What will we do with the millions of people who are going to be displaced because of AI? How will they be able to support themselves? How will society understand and relate to them? What obligation do we have to people who, through no fault of their own, see their jobs totally disappear? How do we get ahead of that problem? Because it's going to happen to us. And then with respect to the climate, in addition to the energy and the water issues, are we going to make sure that whatever information is available is, number one, accurate, so we can rely on it, whatever the data is, but number two, do we have the existing infrastructure to respond? Can our grids handle it? Speaking for the United States, I don't think our grids can handle whatever the new load is and whatever the new predictions are. So how do we plan for all of this to make it more of a positive than a negative, literally across the world? So I think that the AI conversations that are happening are important, but governments need to be ready to demand answers. The people running these companies are the richest people in the world. These companies are extremely powerful. They want to shape the future. They want to shape the politics of the future in every country in the world, but especially powerful leading countries like India. They want to be the determiners of how you respond to them instead of people through their elected governments determining how they should respond to us. So I think this is a big challenge for governments, but it should also be a challenge for the rest of us to push our governments to respond to. And, you know, a lot of people don't like the idea of regulation, but honestly, I think we've got to be willing to figure out how best to organize and regulate. Because what we learned with social media, we learned too late. Why are countries now regulating social media to try to prevent them from influencing our children? Because we have evidence that children have been negatively affected by social media. They have had greater increases, those who use it the most, or those who are most vulnerable to using it, in things like anxiety and depression and suicide and all the rest of it. But they've also lost their attention. I'll just give you a quick example. So in New York, we just passed a law that children could not bring their phones to school. Now, some people say, well, why'd they ever let them bring the phones to school? Because we didn't understand what a detriment to learning it was. So now we are seeing increased attention spans again in classrooms. We're seeing more engagement between students and teachers. We're seeing students actually talk to each other, not walk around with their heads down looking at their screens. So we learned. It was a hard lesson. It took a decade to learn that lesson. So let's not let AI influence us negatively and then learn the lessons, and it may be too late to try to do anything about energy, water, labor markets, unemployment, hallucinations, delusions that AI promotes. Let's figure out how we can deal with that ahead of time and try to shape it rather than be shaped by it.
I think that's some very, very wise words of advice.